Date dimension table. If you work in any analytics project, you need to have a dedicated date table. You must have at least one date table should be created apart from the business tables in your data model. So now the question is, why do we need to have date tables? The date and time based analysis are usually or typically performed in Power BI reports. Okay, not only Power BI reports, if you take any other reports, the time based analysis, if you want to perform it, you need to have a separate date dimension table. This is where creating a date table comes in handy. Okay, so the date table allows us to slice and dice our data by date attributes or columns like weekday, month, quarter, and year. Okay, so now we will take a look at what are the guidelines that needs to be followed while creating a date table in Power BI. You need to have at least one column as a date column, and it should be a date data type. It should be a date or date time data type column. You should have it. The data type should be this one. And then the next prerequisite is the date column should have unique values in it. You are not supposed to have duplicate values. And then you should not have any blank values in it. And then you should not have the missing dates. Supposing you started your business on 1st Jan 2023, and till date, whatever the dates are there, it has to be stored. But it should not, we are not supposed to store the same date more than one time. It should not be, the date column should have unique values, but it should have the continuous values. It should have continuous, that is what it tells us, continuous value. There should not be any gap. Don't say, no, 1 week we did not work, we shut down our shop. Okay, just because you shut down your shop, don't leave 1 week gap. For example, 1st Feb we operated, and then 15th Feb only we resumed our business. In between, we did not do any business, hence I don't want to store it. No, whether you operate your business or not, 1st to 15th, all the dates should be stored here, but no duplicates, no blank values. You are not supposed to skip the dates. That's what I'm trying to say. The date column must span full years. Okay, so full years. The years nothing but so year need not to be a calendar. It can be a fiscal year also. Once you create your custom date dimension table, you need to set it as a date table. So there is an option in the model view to set your date table as a look here like this, mark as date table. So you select your column. Let's say in this case, there's a date column. So you need to select mark as date table and click on OK. So hence, henceforth, this table will be considered as a date table by Power BI. Okay, now the question is, okay, these are the guidelines, everything is fine. How can I go ahead and create the date table? Auto date time option is available. As I discussed, I showed you in the previous session. Once again, I'll show you. If you go to the Power BI desktop, in the options, in the Power BI desktop, you have something called options. In the options, you will find something called data load. In the data load, you'll find something like auto date time. That is the one by default enabled. Just give me a second. So there is an auto date time option. By default, that one was enabled. I'll show you once the Power BI desktop gets launched once again. Okay. The previous session I have shown you, but even today's session I'll show you. So this is not the recommended one, because the auto date time, what happens is Power BI creates the date table behind the scene automatically if your table have date columns in it. Fine, let him create it, but the issue here is for each date column, it creates separate date dimension table, date table behind the scene. Supposing in your You have 3 tables, and each table you have three date columns are there. So 3 into 3, 9 date columns are there. For each date column, it creates a date table behind the scene, which is not required. And other thing is, other disadvantage of this one is you cannot see the table at all. If you wanted to see the date table created by Power BI, you need to use something called DAX Studio. It is an open source. You can also go ahead and download, install it. With DAX Studio, you can see the date table created by Power BI. You can see it there, but you cannot create additional columns in it. For example, you want to store the month in terms of text. January, February, March, April, you cannot create additional columns. Because in your reporting requirement, the x-axis, you want to display the entire year month-wise sales performance or revenue performance. So January month should be, instead of month number, month name, they want it. So you cannot create a custom column with the default date table created by Power BI Desktop. And other disadvantages, you cannot refer the date column that are available in your default date table in your DAX query. Hence, it is not recommended to use the date table, the automatic date table. You can better disable it. And the next one is you can use the Power Query to generate a date table. So here in the previous case, I have shown you how to create the date table, right? So date table, in the sense how to extract a month from order date table, and how to extract month, year, date, quarter, everything you can do it with the Power Query menu option. That way you can do it. And the other thing is like you can generate a date table using a calendar function. But you need to specify the calendar function is a DAX function. The first argument is supposed to be your the start date, and then the second argument is supposed to be end date. The case of calendar function, you need to tell what is the order, the start date and date, you need to specify it here. To make it dynamic, you need to use minimum of, for example, order date, max of order date. The minimum of order date tells you the earliest date, and the max of order date tells you the recent date. Okay, between these two dates, you generate all the dates contiguously and store it in a table. The calendar function returns a table with a single column date. The date column will be your date data type. It will hold the range of dates between the start to end date, stored in a contiguous manner. Next one is, the other option is you have something else called calendar auto. Okay, here I did not specify calendar auto. Using calendar auto, also you can store it. Look here, I just something called calendar auto. The difference between calendar and calendar auto is, in this case, you don't have to specify the start or end date. It automatically finds out the earliest date and then the recent date from your model. Okay, now the question is, okay, how it finds out automatically the start and end date in my model? Supposing, you see, in this case, we can use the min of order date and max of order date. But in your model, the fact table have order date and also it has shipment date, shipped date or something like that. If you take the minimum of the order date, it tells us, okay, when we received the first order. So when did I, so let's I started my business. So when did I receive my first order? The earliest date. The current date, which order, what is the current order you received it? But you have something called shipped date. Okay, if you take the min and max on the ship date column, what will happen? The minimum ship date, the minimum of the ship date need not to be same as the minimum of your order date. Customer order 1/1/2023 order date, minimum order date. If you have done the same day shipment, then your minimum ship date also same. Not always same. Minimum ship date and order date. The ship date is always greater than your order date. To take your entire transaction, right? Let's not go by a one scenario, one or few scenarios. Majority of the cases, ship date is greater than your order date. You agree with me or not? You order the product on 5th February and they shipped it on 8th Feb. So it is greater than, ship date is greater than your order date. Now the question is, okay, if I use the order date, if I base the order date column to create a calendar table using min and maximum, what will happen? You have another column called ship date. The ship date maximum. For example, here the recent order date was something like 10th Feb. But if you see the recent shipment date was 15th Feb. So can I take this as a maximum or can I take this as a maximum? If I use order date here to find out the min or maximum between this range to create the calendar table, you will end up this kind of dilemma. Okay, so rather what you do is go by on calendar auto. Even in this case, okay, and if you have multiple date columns, order date, ship date, due date, okay, and we have multiple date columns. Which one should I go on? So what happens is in that case, the calendar auto comes into, comes in handy. So here the calendar auto function does not take any argument. Okay, but even though it doesn't take any argument, here you can specify the interval, like the fiscal date here. Okay, so the calendar auto function can have an argument. Okay, integer 1 to 12. Okay, it can have an argument, the 1 to 12. Here, the 1 to 12, what it tells us, right? Which month is the last month of fiscal year? Supposing you specify 3 here, 3 is the last month of the fiscal year, month 3. So March 3. So what will happen is it will create the date table starting from 1st April to next year, March 31st, automatically finds out. The other advantage of calendar auto is you don't have to specify min, start or end date. In the case of calendar auto, simply you specify calendar auto function. You don't have to specify integer value also. In that case, what happens is the calendar auto function, it goes to your model and it goes and checks which date column has the least value in it and which table, which date column have the maximum date column in it. Like I said in the previous topic, you have something on order fact, fulfillment fact. Here you have shipment date, here you have the order date. It goes to these tables and finds out which table date column have minimum value in it, minimum date value in it. It picks up which table have the maximum value in the date column. It goes and picks up that, and then it returns a table like a calendar function, and that table will have only one date column in it. It will store the value contiguously between the ranges, minimum and maximum ranges. It will store it. That is the difference between calendar and calendar auto. Calendar auto is very dynamic, isn't it? Very. The other way of doing is you can clone an existing table, but first of all, to clone the existing date table, you need to have the date column, right? So you need to have the date dimension table. If you are building up, the date dimension table or data model from the scratch, you will not have the date dimension already available. The best option is if you want to use a DAX function, you can use either calendar function or you can use a calendar auto, but calendar auto is pretty much handy. So along with you have something called add columns function, add columns. So here there is no space, add columns. This add columns function, it makes our job pretty simple. Okay, what happens is in the case of add columns, you can create all the columns that are required as part of your date dimension tables in one go. Like calendar auto function returns a table. Add columns also returns a table. But the add columns function takes the argument as a table. Okay. Add columns, you need to specify the table. First argument supposed to be a table. Since calendar auto returns the table, we can use calendar auto here. Add columns calendar auto, comma, month, year, everything you can extract it from this itself. The calendar auto returns a date table, isn't it? The date table itself, you can extract month, year, so that you don't have to create the columns one after other. So what I will do is, instead of talking everything, I'll just show you the demo here. How to create the date table using calendar dimension. So calendar DAX function. What I do is I will click on the new table. Look here, currently I'm in the data view. Please concentrate here, data view. Okay, here you need to click on the new table. Here what I do is dim date. I'm going to create a new dimension date. For demo, already it is there, but for demonstration purpose, I'm going to create it again. Calendar table and the start date and date. You can specify, you can hard code the values, but hard coding is not the best practice. For example, I can say 2001, something like that. This is not the best practice. Instead, what you do is you can use the min function. Here, let's say if I give order date, take the least order date and then maximum order date. So what if I give like this, what will happen is it will create the calendar table or date dimension table, which will have the earliest order date, earliest date, and then latest date, recent date in it. Okay, it will create the day. You see, this function, the calendar function, will return a table. That table will have only one column, the date column. The date column, if you see the values, it will start from this and end with this one. In this case, instead of blindly using some dates, I'm using order date column here. According to me, this one, the minimum of order date gives me the date when I receive the first order. If I store the dates from that day onward, that makes sense. Hence, I use the minimum order date. So in this case, like I said, the calendar function return a table. In this table, you can, it returned created a date column. The date column have date timestamp here. We don't need the date timestamp. I just click on it here. I just convert the date time, data type. Now my dim date table is ready. So date dimension is ready. Look here on the right side, it will clear. So date thing is available here. And if we expand this one, you can see date hierarchy. It automatically gives you the year requirement. This is what your automatic date table. I did not disable it here. Hence it creates automatically, but this is not much helpful. What I do is I'm going to explicitly create the additional columns. For example, I'm going to hit this new column. I just say year is equivalent to, year is equivalent to the dim date column. You need to be very careful. Okay. So in this, see this date column, I passed this an argument because you want to extract the year from this column and be stored in another column called year. Next, I'm going to hit the new column. Now I'm going to extract month alone from this column. Similarly, you can use a quarter function to extract quarter from this table, this column, and month and this month number, month in terms of month number. Okay, here I just want to have the quarter here. You have a quarter function is available. Okay, I need the month in terms of text value. I just say month prefix is equivalent to format of dim dates, date column, comma. Here what I do is here I just say the MMM. If you put 3M here, it will display the entire month name. So January, but I don't want the entire name to be displayed for each month. Instead, display only the 3 letters for each month. For that, I use the format function. The first argument supports your date column, and second one is your format. 3M, if you specify, it will give you the month in terms of 3 letters. If you want the entire month name, right, full month name, just 4M use it. Here, I just, if I want additional columns, I need to click on the new column every now and then. It is painful. Other thing is it has to calculate the minimum. For example, if I select the dim date here, it has to compute the minimum date and it has to compute the maximum date. And then based on which it has to create the current table, start from the beginning of the year to till the recent date. This is the painful thing, right? So it's a painful thing. So next approach, what we do is we'll see how we can use the calendar auto function in addition to the add columns function. And in the case of add columns, you don't have to manually click on each and every time the columns. Okay, you don't have to create each column separately. You don't have to spend time in clicking on new column, new column. Okay, I already explained you the logic of the calendar auto. See, in the case of calendar auto, I just repeat it here. Look here, this is how it works. Remember this. Supposing you have the order date and ship date, your minimum order date is, let's say, your minimum order date is something like 31/12/2014. This is your, sorry, let's say this is your maximum order date, and your minimum order date is something like 1/1/2011. And then the next one is the maximum of ship date, something like 7/1/2015, and then minimum of ship date. (2011). Okay, in this case, what happens is the order date, the minimum order date is 1/1/2011, and then the minimum of ship date is 3/1/2011. This means this is the first Jan we received the order, but it has been fulfilled or shipped on 3rd January only. So of these two minimum order date, which one is minimum? It goes by this one. Which one? The calendar auto function. Okay, of these two minimum dates, two different date columns. Of these two different date columns, which one is minimum? These two different date columns values, right? It compares the minimum date between these two columns values, and this one is the minimum one compared to these two values. Similarly, maximum it compares. So maximum order 31/12/2014, but here the 7/1. So the maximum one is this one, it considers this one, it is not considering this one. It is not considering this one, it is considering this one. The minimum, it compares these two different date columns values, and then of those two, which one is minimum, it takes. And again, it compares the two different date columns, date values, and then it picks up the maximum date values. With this range, with these two range, it creates the date table. But what happens is here 7/1/2015, for the entire year, it creates the calendar table. And then starting from since the beginning of 2011, so 1/1/2011 to 31/12/2015, it builds a date table. So date column, it shows the date value in it. But along with this, we will be using the add columns function. Okay, add columns function. The calculate calendar function also works the same way as calendar auto in one way, because the calendar function also returns a table with the date column. The calendar auto function also returns a table with date column. But the difference is, like I explained you, right? That is the difference. Now we will see how we can use the add columns function to create multiple things. So the add columns function, what happens is, right, it literally makes it possible to add columns to the formula as we build our table. We don't have to create the columns separately, one after other. We don't have to do it. So now what I do is I just go and create a new table. We will see how we can use the calendar auto along with add columns function. The add columns function takes three arguments. One is the table. The first argument is supposed to be your table. And the second one is supposed to be your name. And third one is supposed to be your expression. Okay, here what I do is dim calendar auto. I just give some meaningful name, but in real time don't give this way. This is for our learning purpose. Here what I do is I'm going to use the add columns. The first argument supposed to be a table. And what is the table here? The table is nothing but, instead of giving the table name, I just give calendar auto. Because the calendar auto function automatically finds out the recent minimum date and the maximum date from your model and returns a table with date column. Hence, I'm going to use a calendar auto because this one is going to return a table. That one, you can use it here in add columns. So the table is nothing but calendar auto. Next one is name. What name you want to give it to your columns? That is the one you need to specify it. For example, here, I just I was holding my Alt key and then pressed enter. The cursor came to the next line. And then you can use the tab to, move your cursor here. Month, for example, here I'm going to use format. Here what I do is I use a date. Look here, this calendar auto function returns a date column. That is the one I used it here. This time no order date, okay? What are the values returned by my calendar auto? That is the one I'm using it here. This format function ends here. And if you want year, for example, you want to have it here. You want to have year, you can specify yes. So here the table is calendar auto, first argument. Second one is the name of your column. this parenthesis to close this first parenthesis. Okay, for the corresponding first parenthesis, we need to make sure that we are using the corresponding. So whenever you open it, you need to close it, close parenthesis. And this is for this one. Okay, and everything is fine. When I click on the tick mark here, this one will get executed. In case of any syntax error, it will throw in. So in this case, year, month, quarter, weekday, everything you can get in one go. Instead of clicking the new column each and every time, you can, you can do it this way. So here, this one I just concatenated /q, along with the q will give you the 1, 2, 3 or something like that. Okay, and you can simply use a q, or if you want to concatenate the value returned by the q will return the quarter number. Along with that, I want to concatenate q. Okay, since now you see q3, q4 meaningful value. You can likewise you can add another other rest of the columns also, like you can want, if you want, you have seen this case my month, year, quarter, and month number also. So year, month number also you can store it here. Month number, month of date column. For example, here, if I say the month number, so currently the month displays the month name. Along with that, I need the month number. This is mandatory. The month number, make sure that you're using month number, because with this only you can sort it. There is a month function that is available here, and then the date column. This date column is nothing but your calendar auto. The calendar auto creates a column called date, right? So you can pick up here and you just press enter. So now you understood creating the date dimension using the add columns pretty faster, because it involves just specifying the columns that are what all the columns that you needed. You can specify everything in a single script and press enter. That's all. Your job is pretty simple. With calendar auto, it automatically finds out the minimum and maximum date from your model, and then it returns a table which will have date column in it. Once it returns a date column, extracting year, month, quarter, and the rest of the columns is pretty simple. But here you don't have to click on a new column every now and then to create multiple tables. Hope with this you are able to understand the difference between calendar function and calendar auto function, and also explain you the automatic table and its disadvantages.